Everyone knows money talks, but at JFK Terminal 4, silence was about to scream louder than any engine on the tarmac. Two 19-year-old sisters stood at the first-class counter, holding tickets worth more than the gate agent's annual salary. They didn't scream. They didn't fight. They just watched as a staff member named Felicity shredded their boarding passes and laughed in their faces. She thought she was protecting the airline from fraud. She didn't realize she was looking at the daughters of the man who owned the fuel contracts for every plane on the East Coast. One phone call later, the departure screens didn't just flicker. They went black. And Felicity? She was about to learn that when you clip a bird's wings, the whole sky can fall on your head. The automatic doors of JFK International Airport slid open with a rush of conditioned air, and the chaotic symphony of travel, rolling wheels, crying babies, and the relentless announcement of delays. Into this noise stepped Morgan and Zoe Kingsley. At 19, the twins were a striking pair. They shared the same mahogany skin, high cheekbones, and an effortless poise that usually took decades to master. But their style was distinct. Morgan wore an oversized vintage denim jacket over a silk slip dress, her hair in long, waist-length box braids that swayed as she walked. Zoe favored a sharper look, cargo trousers that cost more than a used sedan, a cropped hoodie, and a natural afro that formed a halo around her head. To the untrained eye, they looked like Gen Z influencers or perhaps art students. To the trained eye, the details whispered wealth. The luggage they rolled wasn't just sturdy. It was vintage Louis Vuitton hard shell, the kind you inherited, not bought. The headphones around Zoe's neck were limited edition Bang & Olufsen. But Felicity, the senior gate agent for Aura Airlines, didn't have a trained eye. She had a tired eye. She had a judgmental eye. Felicity stood behind the marble-topped counter of the Priority 1 check-in zone, a secluded area separated from the economy chaos by velvet ropes and frosted glass. She adjusted her silk scarf, tapped her nails on the polished granite, and watched the line. It was mostly older men in suits, a few wealthy matrons with small dogs, and one famous tech CEO she recognized from a magazine. Then she saw Morgan and Zoe approach the velvet rope. Morgan, checking her phone, moved to unhook the barrier. "Excuse me." Felicity's voice cut through the low hum of the exclusive lounge. It wasn't a question. It was a command. Morgan paused, her hand on the silver clip. She looked up, her expression mild. "Yes?" "The economy line is around the corner, past the Starbucks," Felicity said, pointing a manicured finger toward the crowded snake-like queue visible through the glass partition. "This area is for Priority 1 passengers only." Zoe stepped up beside her sister, adjusting her grip on her suitcase handle. "We know," Zoe said, her voice smooth and calm. "We're flying Priority 1 to London." Felicity let out a short, incredulous puff of air. She looked them up and down. She saw the denim. She saw the braids. She saw the youth. She did not see the black card in Morgan's pocket or the surname on the manifest. She saw two girls who looked like they belonged in the back of the bus, trying to sneak into the palace. "I need to see tickets before you even cross that rope," Felicity said, crossing her arms. "We've had issues with people trying to use the lounge for content creation. This isn't a TikTok set." Morgan exchanged a glance with Zoe. It was a look they had shared 1,000 times before, in high-end boutiques, in 5-star hotel lobbies, and at private schools. The "here we go again" look. "We aren't creating content," Morgan said, pulling up her digital wallet on her phone. "We are passengers." "Paper tickets," Felicity snapped. "System is glitching for mobile passes today. If you don't have paper tickets, you need to go to the main kiosk." "We can print them here," Zoe pointed out, gesturing to the small printer behind Felicity's desk. That's part of the priority service, isn't it? For actual priority members, Felicity corrected, her voice dripping with condescension. Look, girls, I'm going to ask you once to step back. Mr. Henderson is behind you, and unlike you, he has a flight to catch. Behind the twins, a middle-aged man in a grey suit sighed loudly, checking his watch. He didn't say anything to defend them. He just looked annoyed that his path was blocked. Morgan stood her ground. We are on flight AU-410 to Heathrow. Seat 1A and 1B. Name, Kingsley. Felicity didn't type anything. She didn't look at her screen. She just shook her head. 1A and 1B are reserved for our diplomatic class. They cost $12,000 a seat. You expect me to believe 2 teenagers bought them? Our father bought them, Zoe said, her patience thinning. Oh, Daddy bought them. Felicity laughed, a harsh, grating sound. Let me guess. He's a prince? A rapper? Look, I don't have time for games. Security is already on high alert today. If you don't leave the priority area, I'm calling the police for trespassing. Morgan's eyes hardened. Check the manifest. Just type in the name. I don't need to check to know when someone is scamming, Felicity sneered. She stepped out from behind the counter, walking up to the velvet rope, effectively physically blocking their entry. This lane is for people who have earned their status, not for kids playing dress-up. Morgan took a deep breath. She reached into her bag. Don't reach for anything, Felicity shrieked, jumping back as if Morgan had pulled a weapon. Did you see that? She yelled to the security guard standing near the economy entrance. She reached for something. The guard, a burly man named Officer Miller, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, lumbered over. Problem here, Felicity? These 2 are refusing to leave the priority zone and creating a disturbance, and she just made a threatening motion, Felicity lied, her face flushing with the excitement of authority. Morgan slowly pulled her hand out of her bag. She was holding a platinum passport case. I was getting my ID, she said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly calm. Officer, we are ticketed passengers. This agent is refusing to check us in based on our appearance. Officer Miller looked at the girls, then at Felicity. Check their IDs, Felicity. If they aren't on the list, I'll escort them out. Felicity huffed, snatching the passports from Morgan's hand with unnecessary force. She marched back to her terminal, typing with aggressive, loud strokes. She stared at the screen. She blinked. She frowned. The screen clearly displayed Kingsley Morgan, Kingsley Zoe. Status: VIP Elite. Do not offload. But Felicity was too far gone. In her mind, she had already decided they were frauds. The computer saying otherwise didn't mean she was wrong. It meant the system had been hacked. She had heard about credit card fraud rings. This was it. She was going to be a hero. She looked up, a sinister smile playing on her lips. I knew it. You found our reservation? Zoe asked. I found a fraudulent booking, Felicity announced loudly enough for the entire lounge to hear. Stolen credit card, flagged for immediate cancellation. She hit a sequence of keys. Delete, confirm. The printer whirred. It didn't print a boarding pass. It printed a void receipt. Felicity ripped the paper out and held it up. Reservation cancelled, and I'm keeping these passports until the police verify they aren't fake too. The air in the terminal seemed to freeze. Morgan looked at Zoe. Zoe looked at Morgan. You just cancelled our tickets, Morgan said, her voice barely a whisper. I stopped a crime, Felicity corrected, puffing her chest out. Now, officer, get them out of my sight before I press charges for attempted fraud. The humiliation was designed to be public. That was Felicity's favorite weapon. It wasn't enough to deny someone. You had to make them feel small so they wouldn't dare fight back. Mr. Henderson, the man in the grey suit, pushed past the girls as Officer Miller ushered them aside. About time, the man muttered, handing his gold card to Felicity. "Good catch, darling. Can't have the riffraff clogging up the works." "So sorry for the delay, Mr. Henderson," Felicity cooed, her demeanor shifting instantly from viper to servant. "You know how it is. People think they can get away with anything these days." Morgan and Zoe stood a few feet away, near a pillar, boxed in by Officer Miller. "Look," Miller said, his voice lower now, not unkind, but firm. "If you girls leave now, we can forget the trespassing. But if she calls the Port Authority police, you're looking at a night in a cell. Just go home." "We aren't going home," Zoe said, her hands shaking slightly. Not from fear, but from a rage she was struggling to contain. "We are going to London for Fashion Week. Our father is meeting us there." "Not on Aura Airlines, you aren't," Miller said, hooking his thumbs in his belt. "She voided your tickets. It's done." Morgan pulled out her phone. "It's not done." "No calls," Miller warned. "I'm allowed to make a phone call in a public airport," Morgan snapped, her eyes flashing fire. "Unless being black in a terminal is now a crime, too?" Miller hesitated. He knew the optics were bad. Bystanders from the economy line had started to notice. Phones were coming out. A teenage boy in a hoodie was recording the interaction from behind a vending machine. Miller stepped back. "Make your call. Then you leave." Morgan dialed. She didn't call customer service. She didn't call their lawyer. She pressed the speed dial for Dad. It rang twice. "Morgan." The voice on the other end was deep, warm but distracted. The background noise on his end sounded like a boardroom. Muffled voices, the clink of china. "Everything okay? You should be boarding soon." "We aren't boarding, Dad," Morgan said, staring directly at Felicity, who was now laughing with Mr. Henderson while applying fresh lipstick. "Why? Is the flight delayed?" "We've been denied check-in," Morgan said clearly. "The gate agent, Felicity, said our tickets were purchased with a stolen credit card. She deleted our reservation, she confiscated our passports, and she is currently threatening to have us arrested." There was a silence on the line. It was a heavy, terrifying silence, the kind of silence that happens before a tsunami hits the shore. She said, "Stolen?" Dawson Kingsley's voice had lost all warmth. It was now cold steel. "She called us riffraff. She refused to look at the screen until the officer forced her, and then when she saw the booking, she claimed it was fraud and deleted it." "Put her on the phone," Dawson said. Morgan walked back toward the velvet rope. Officer Miller moved to stop her, but Morgan held up the phone. "My father wants to speak to the agent." Felicity looked up, annoyed. "I'm not speaking to your daddy. Tell him to call the fraud department on Monday." "He says it's urgent," Morgan said, extending the phone. "I don't care," Felicity mocked. "Get that thing away from me." Morgan pulled the phone back. "She refused to speak to you, Dad. Where are you exactly?" "Terminal 4, Gate A1, check-in." "And the airline?" "Aura." "Okay," Dawson said. "Stay right there. Don't move. Don't let them move you. If the police come, you stay silent until legal arrives. Give me 5 minutes." The line went dead. Morgan lowered the phone. She looked at Zoe and nodded. They leaned against the pillar, crossing their arms. "I told you to leave!" Felicity shouted, noticing they were still there. She picked up her desk phone. "I'm calling the manager. This is harassment." A few moments later, a man in a tight blue blazer scurried out from the back office. This was Roger, the station manager for Aura Airlines. He looked flustered, sweating slightly under the fluorescent lights. "What is going on, Felicity?" Roger asked, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. "I have reports of a disturbance." "These two," Felicity pointed a long acrylic nail at the twins. "Fake tickets. I caught them, voided the transaction, and now they won't leave. They're trying to intimidate me." Roger turned to the twins. He didn't ask for their side of the story. He saw Felicity, his senior agent, and he saw 2 young girls. He made the calculation instantly. "Ladies," Roger said, using his customer service voice that was really just authorized rudeness. "You are disrupting our premium passengers. You have been denied carriage. That is a final decision. Aura Airlines reserves the right to refuse service to anyone we deem a security risk or a financial liability." "A financial liability?" Zoe laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You have no idea." "You need to leave the terminal," Roger commanded. "Now, or I will have you banned from flying any airline out of JFK." "We aren't leaving until we get our passports back," Morgan said. "The passports are evidence," Felicity chimed in, clutching them to her chest. "I'm handing them to the police." "Give them their passports, Felicity," Roger said, trying to de-escalate slightly. "We don't need to hold them. Just get them out." "No," Felicity insisted. "If I give them back, they'll just try this at another counter. I'm protecting the company." Roger sighed. He looked at the twins. "You heard her. Police matter now. Step outside." Just then, the teenage boy who had been filming walked past, pretending to throw away trash. He whispered to Zoe, "I got it all. The whole thing. I'm posting it." Zoe gave a subtle nod. Suddenly, the ambient noise of the airport changed. It was a subtle shift at first. The luggage belts behind the counter slowed to a halt. The screens above Felicity's head, which displayed the departures to London, Paris, and Rome, flickered. Then, the radio on Officer Miller's belt crackled. All units. We have a code red on the tarmac. Repeat, code red." Miller frowned, grabbing his radio. "What kind of code red? Is it a shooter?" "Negative," the dispatcher's voice came through, sounding confused. It's the fuel trucks. They've all stopped. Every single one." Roger frowned. "Fuel trucks? What does that have to do with us?" He looked at his computer screen. A red banner flashed across the Aura Airlines internal system. "System alert. Global ground stop." "What is this?" Roger tapped his keyboard frantically. "Felicity, are you seeing this?" "My screen is frozen," Felicity complained, banging her mouse. "It just says, administrative lock." Morgan checked her watch. It had been exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds since she hung up the phone. "What did you do?" Roger spun around, pointing at the twins. "Did you hack us?" "We didn't do anything," Morgan said calmly. "But I think my dad made a call." "Your dad?" Felicity scoffed, though her voice wavered slightly. "Who is he, the Wizard of Oz?" "No," Zoe said, a small smile playing on her lips. "Dawson Kingsley." Roger froze. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like he might faint. He knew that name. Every airline manager knew that name. Dawson Kingsley wasn't just a rich guy. He was the CEO of Kingsley Energy and Logistics. He owned the company that supplied aviation fuel to JFK. He owned the company that managed the baggage handling software. He owned the firm that leased the aircraft hangars Aura Airlines used for maintenance. Roger looked at the red banner on his screen. Then he looked at the twins. Then he looked at Felicity, who was still clutching the passports like a prize. "Felicity," Roger whispered, his voice trembling. "What was the name on those tickets?" "Kingsley," she said, confused. "Morgan and Zoe Kingsley. Why?" Roger's knees buckled. He grabbed the counter for support. "Oh my God," Roger breathed. "You just accused the owner's daughters of fraud." "The owner?" Felicity blinked. "We don't work for Kingsley Energy." "No," Roger screamed, his composure shattering. "But our planes don't fly without his gas. Felicity, give them the passports. Right now." But before Felicity could move, the public address system chimed. It wasn't the usual robotic voice. It was a human voice, breathless and panicked. "Attention all Aura Airlines staff and passengers. All operations are suspended immediately due to a supply chain halt. Will the station manager please report to the white courtesy phone immediately? The chairman of the board is on the line." Morgan stepped forward. "I think that's for you, Roger." The white courtesy phone behind the check-in desk was flashing red, a silent siren screaming for attention. Roger stared at it as if it were a bomb. His hands were shaking so violently he had to clasp them together to stop the tremors. "Pick it up, Roger," Morgan said. Her voice was devoid of malice, which somehow made it worse. It was the voice of someone who knew exactly how the world worked and was simply waiting for everyone else to catch up. Roger lifted the receiver. He didn't even get a chance to say hello. "Roger, is that you?" The voice on the other end was unmistakable. It was Arthur Pendleton, the chairman of Aura Airlines, a man who usually spent his Fridays on a yacht in the Mediterranean, not screaming into a phone. "Tell me right now why the CEO of Kingsley Energy just called me to say he is invoking the force majeure clause on all our fuel contracts, effective immediately." "Mr. Pendleton," Roger stammered, sweat dripping down his nose onto his starched collar. There was an incident at the gate." "An incident?" Pendleton's voice cracked. "Roger, look out the window. Tell me what you see." Roger turned slowly. The Priority 1 check-in area had a floor-to-ceiling view of the tarmac. Usually, this was a selling point, allowing wealthy passengers to watch the sleek jets prepare for departure. Now, it was a window into a disaster. Out on the tarmac, the ecosystem of the airport had collapsed. The massive fuel trucks, usually painted in the bright yellow and green of Kingsley Energy, had not just stopped moving. They had parked strategically. One truck was parked directly in front of the nose gear of the London-bound Boeing 777. Another was blocking the taxiway exit. A third was parked perpendicular to the baggage carts, boxing them in. It wasn't a strike. It was a siege. "The trucks are blocking the planes, sir," Roger whispered. "Of course they are," Pendleton roared. "Kingsley doesn't just supply the fuel, Roger. He owns the logistics software that coordinates the ground crews. He just locked us out of our own system. We can't push back. We can't fuel up. We can't even unload the luggage. Do you know how much this is costing us? Roughly $300,000 a minute." Felicity, standing nearby, overheard the shouting coming from the earpiece. She rolled her eyes, still clutching the passports. "It's a glitch," she muttered to Officer Miller. "The system is just down. These girls are just lucky, that's all. Daddy didn't do this." Morgan heard her. She turned her head slightly. "Dad didn't do this," she corrected softly. "He just made a phone call. The loyalty of his employees did this." Roger turned back to the phone. "Mr. Pendleton, what do I do?" "You find out what Kingsley wants," Pendleton commanded. "He said his daughters are being held hostage by a rogue agent at Terminal 4. Fix it, Roger. Fix it, or you and everyone standing within 10 feet of you is fired." No, not fired. Sued for negligence. The line went dead. Roger hung up the phone. He turned to Felicity. The panic in his eyes had been replaced by a desperate, feral need for survival. "Give me the passports," Roger said, enunciating every word. "Roger, you're overreacting," Felicity scoffed, though she took a half-step back. "We have protocol. If I give these back now, I look weak. And if they really are frauds—" "They aren't frauds, you idiot!" Roger screamed, his voice cracking. The sound silenced the entire Priority Lounge. "That is Morgan and Zoe Kingsley. Their father is currently strangling this airline with his bare hands because you wanted to play border patrol." He lunged forward and snatched the blue booklets from her hand. He opened them. He didn't need to type anything into the computer. There, stamped on the first page of the visas, was the diplomatic clearance stamp usually reserved for ambassadors' families. Roger felt the blood leave his head. He turned to the twins, holding the passports out with two trembling hands, bowing his head slightly, like a servant offering a sword to a queen. Miss Kingsley. Purely a misunderstanding. A terrible, glitch-based misunderstanding. Please take your documents. I will personally escort you to the VIP lounge. We have champagne, caviar, whatever you need. Morgan didn't move. She didn't take the passports. We don't want the lounge, Zoe said, checking her nails. We want to board, Morgan added. Yes, of course. Roger turned to the computer. I'll reinstate the tickets. I'll upgrade you to the royal suite. Just, please ask your father to call the trucks off. I can't do that, Morgan said. Why not? Roger pleaded. Because we are currently suspects in a fraud investigation, Morgan said, her eyes drifting to Felicity. Felicity said so. She voided our tickets. She called the police. Unless that is resolved, legally we can't go anywhere, and neither can your planes. I'm dropping the investigation, Roger yelled. Officer Miller, tell them we are dropping it. Officer Miller, who had been watching the scene unfold with a growing sense of dread, nodded quickly. No charges. You're free to go. It's not that simple, Zoe said. She pointed to the crowd of people now gathering at the velvet ropes. The chaos on the tarmac had filtered inside. The flight to London was supposed to board 20 minutes ago. The flight to Paris was delayed. The flight to Dubai was cancelled. Hundreds of passengers, angry, tired, and confused, were swarming the desk. Hey! A man in a tweed jacket yelled from the crowd. Why aren't we boarding? The plane is right there. My insulin is in my checked bag, a woman shouted. They said they can't get the bags off because a truck is blocking the cargo door. What is going on? Roger looked at the mob. He looked at the frozen tarmac. He looked at the twins. What do you want? Roger whispered. Name it. Morgan looked at Felicity. Felicity was standing with her arms crossed, her face a mask of stubborn arrogance. Even now, with the airport collapsing around her, she couldn't bring herself to apologize to two teenage black girls. In her mind, she was still the authority. They were still the intruders. I want an apology, Morgan said. A real one. From her. Roger spun to Felicity. Apologize? Felicity let out a sharp laugh. For what? Doing my job? The system flagged them. I followed protocol. I am not apologizing to entitled brats just because their daddy throws a tantrum. Felicity, Roger hissed. Look outside. That is not a tantrum. That is an apocalypse. Apologize. No, Felicity said, jutting her chin out. I have rights. Union rights. You can't force me to demean myself. Morgan pulled out her phone again. Dad? Yeah, we're still here. No, she hasn't apologized. In fact, she just called us brats. No, don't come down here. It's not worth your... Morgan stopped. She listened. She looked at Zoe. Okay, Morgan said into the phone. I'll tell them. She hung up. He's coming, Morgan said simply. Roger whimpered. Who? Who is coming? My father, Morgan said. He was at a board meeting in Manhattan. He took the helicopter. He's landing on the private helipad in Sector 7 right now. Felicity rolled her eyes. Oh, please. Like a billionaire is going to come to a terminal to yell at a gate agent. Zoe smiled. It was a terrifying smile. He's not coming to yell, Felicity. He's coming to inspect his investment. What investment? Felicity asked. He's buying the Airline, Zoe said. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the angry mob seemed to quiet down, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. What? Roger squeaked. He was already a majority shareholder in the fuel supplier, Morgan explained casually. He's been in talks with your board of directors for months about a hostile takeover. He was on the fence about it. He thought Aura Airlines had management issues. But after today, he's decided to clean house. He's buying the controlling stake. The deal is being signed electronically as we speak. Felicity's face went from pale to a sickly shade of grey. So, Zoe said, stepping closer to the velvet rope. Technically, Felicity, you don't work for Aura Airlines anymore. You work for him. The arrival of Dawson Kingsley was not marked by sirens or shouting. It was marked by the parting of the sea. First came the Port Authority police, not Officer Miller, but the high-ranking captains with gold bars on their collars. They entered the terminal in a wedge formation, pushing the crowd back gently but firmly to create a wide corridor. Then came the legal team, 4 men and 2 women in bespoke suits, walking with the synchronized precision of a military unit. They carried leather folios and projected an aura of absolute competence. And then, Dawson. He was a tall man, over 6'4", with broad shoulders that filled out his charcoal suit. He wore no tie. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. He had a short, well-groomed beard that was salt and pepper, and he wore sunglasses, which he removed as he entered the priority zone. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and currently burning with a cold, controlled fury. He didn't run to his daughters. He didn't make a scene. He walked with a slow, predatory grace. Roger, the station manager, was now trembling so hard he had to lean against the counter. Felicity was frozen, her mouth slightly open, her eyes darting around for an exit that didn't exist. Dawson stopped in front of the velvet rope. He looked at Morgan. He looked at Zoe. He scanned them for injuries, for tears. Seeing none, he nodded once. "Passports," Dawson said. His voice was a deep baritone that carried without effort. Roger scrambled forward, offering the passports with 2 hands. "Mr. Kingsley, sir. I have them right here. I was just—" Dawson didn't look at Roger. He took the passports and handed them to the woman standing to his right, his head of legal, a sharp-eyed woman named Veronica. "Check the stamps," Dawson said to her. "Ensure they haven't been tampered with." "Yes, sir," Veronica said, opening the books. Dawson finally turned his attention to the staff behind the counter. He looked at Roger, dismissing him instantly as a non-threat. Then his gaze landed on Felicity. Felicity tried to stand tall. She tried to summon the arrogance that had served her so well for 20 years of gatekeeping. But under Dawson Kingsley's gaze, she felt like a bug under a microscope. "You must be Felicity," Dawson said. I was doing my job," Felicity stammered, her voice high and thin. "Security protocol. They looked suspicious. The system, Dawson interrupted, is an algorithm designed to flag inconsistencies. It does not possess bias. It does not judge based on hair texture or clothing. People do that." He stepped over the velvet rope. Officer Miller made a move to intercept him, but his captain put a hand on his chest. "Stand down," the captain mouthed. Dawson walked behind the counter. This was a violation of federal security laws, but no one said a word. He stood next to Felicity, looking at her computer screen. "Log in," Dawson said. "Excuse me?" Felicity blinked. "Log in to your terminal. I want to see the transaction history." "I can't," Felicity said, grasping for straws. "It's against company policy to allow civilians to view—" "Veronica," Dawson said without turning around. "Sir? Do we own the airline yet?" Veronica checked her tablet. "The board voted 4 minutes ago. The paperwork is filed. You are the interim chairman of the board, effective immediately." Dawson looked down at Felicity. "I am not a civilian. I am your employer. Log in." Felicity's shaking fingers typed her password. The screen blinked to life. Dawson leaned in. "Search for Kingsley. Show me the voided transaction." She did. There it was. Transaction voided. Reason, suspected fraud. "Now," Dawson said, his voice dropping lower, "show me the last 5 transactions you voided for fraud." Felicity froze. That's not relevant." "Show me." She didn't move. Dawson reached over and tapped the keyboard himself. He was surprisingly adept at the system, likely because his company had designed the back-end interface. He pulled up Felicity's user logs for the last 6 months. He scrolled. Voided, Washington, Jamal. Reason, ID mismatch. Voided, Nguyen, David. Reason, payment error. Voided, Okoro, Sarah. Reason, disruptive behavior. Voided, Jackson, Marcus. Reason, suspected fraud. Dawson read the list out loud. He turned to the crowd of passengers who were listening with rapt attention. "Does anyone notice a pattern?" Dawson asked the room. "They're all ethnic names," a woman in the front row whispered. Dawson turned back to Felicity. 32 denials of boarding in 6 months. 90% of them were people of color, and in every single case, the seats were released and immediately resold to standby passengers, specifically standby passengers with platinum status. Dawson looked at Roger. "Is there a bonus for upgrading platinum members at the gate?" Roger gulped. "Yes, sir. Agents get a commission, $500 per seat." The gasp from the crowd was audible. "So," Dawson said, turning back to Felicity, his voice turning into ice, "you weren't protecting the airline from fraud. You were profiling young, black passengers, cancelling their valid tickets under false pretenses, and selling their seats to your preferred clients to pocket a commission." "That's a lie!" Felicity shrieked. "You can't prove that." "I don't need to prove it in court to fire you," Dawson said, "but I will prove it in court anyway, because I'm not just firing you, Felicity." He turned to Veronica. "Call the district attorney. I want to file charges for wire fraud, discrimination, and theft." "You can't do that!" Felicity yelled, looking around for support. "Mr. Henderson, you saw them. They were aggressive." Mr. Henderson, the man who had pushed past the twins earlier, was currently trying to hide behind a potted plant. He did not come forward. "And Roger," Dawson said, turning to the manager. "Sir?" Roger whispered. "You knew," Dawson said. "You approved these overrides. You signed off on the commission checks." I didn't notice the pattern," Roger lied. "Then you are incompetent," Dawson said. "Which is worse." Dawson turned to his daughters. "Morgan, Zoe, are you ready to go?" "The flight is cancelled, Dad," Zoe said, pointing to the screen. "And the pilot's probably timed out." "The commercial flight is cancelled," Dawson corrected. He gestured to the window. Outside, the chaos had shifted. The Kingsley Energy fuel trucks were moving. But they weren't moving away. They were forming a line, creating a clear path through the gridlock. And rolling down that path, gleaming white in the sun, was a Gulfstream G700 private jet. It didn't belong to Aura Airlines. It belonged to Dawson. "I figured you wouldn't want to fly Aura today," Dawson said. "So I brought the car." He looked back at the terrified staff. "Veronica, stay here. Coordinate with the police regarding Felicity's arrest. Ensure every passenger in this terminal gets a full refund and a voucher for a future flight on my airline. And fire everyone who works at this specific desk. Everyone." "Yes, sir." Dawson put his hands on his daughter's shoulders. "Let's go to London." They turned to leave. But Felicity wasn't done. Desperation makes people do stupid things, and Felicity was about to do the stupidest thing of her life. "You can't just walk away," she screamed, lunging over the counter, grabbing Zoe's hoodie. "I have rights. You rich people think you can just crush us." It happened in a blur. Officer Miller tackled Felicity, but not before she ripped the sleeve of Zoe's limited edition hoodie. Zoe looked at the torn fabric. She looked at Felicity, who was now pinned to the dirty airport carpet, handcuffs clicking into place. Zoe leaned down. "We didn't crush you, Felicity," Zoe whispered. "You stood in front of a jet engine and expected it to stop because you said so." Dawson didn't even look back. He guided his daughters through the velvet ropes, the crowd parting for them, cameras flashing as they walked out onto the tarmac toward the waiting jet. But the story wasn't over. The karma was just warming up, because while Dawson had handled the business side, the internet was about to handle the personal side. While Morgan and Zoe were sipping elderflower spritzers at 45,000 feet in the hushed luxury of the Gulfstream G700, the world below was catching fire. The teenager who had filmed the incident was named Leo. He hadn't just posted the video. He had captioned it with lethal precision. "Aura Airlines agent Felicity shreds tickets of black billionaire's daughters. Wait for the ending. Kingsley, Pyaket Karma, I thought Aura Airlines." By the time the twins landed in London, the video had 40 million views. The internet did what the internet does best. It became a detective agency, a jury, and an executioner all at once. Within hours, Felicity was trending worldwide. But it wasn't just hashtags. The online community had zoomed in on her name tag. They had found her LinkedIn profile. They had found her Facebook page, which was filled with subtle, passive-aggressive complaints about urban youth and noise in the lounge. But the real twist came from the passengers she had wronged in the past. Dawson had read 4 names off the screen, but the internet found dozens. A hashtag, Nosta denied by Felicity, began to populate with horror stories. A surgeon from Chicago posted a video explaining how Felicity had denied him boarding for a transplant surgery because she thought his medical credentials looked photocopied. A grandmother posted about missing her granddaughter's baptism because Felicity claimed her cane was a weapon. The floodgates had opened. Back in New York, Felicity sat in a holding cell at the Queens County Central booking. The air smelled of bleach and despair. She was still wearing her Aura Airlines uniform, though the scarf was missing, confiscated as a potential strangulation risk. She paced the small cell, waiting for the door to open. She expected a union rep. She expected a lawyer provided by the airline. She expected Mr. Henderson or one of her VIP regulars to bail her out. The door finally buzzed open. It wasn't a lawyer. It was Detective Russo, a weary-looking woman with a tablet under her arm. "Your arraignment is in an hour," Russo said, leaning against the doorframe. "Where is my lawyer?" Felicity demanded, her voice raspy. "I want the airline's legal team. I am an employee acting in the scope of my duties. They have to defend me." Russo let out a dry chuckle. She tapped the screen of her tablet and turned it around so Felicity could see through the bars. It was a press release from Aura Airlines. For immediate release, Aura Airlines condemns all forms of discrimination. Effective immediately, the employment of Ms. Felicity Baines has been terminated for cause. Furthermore, Aura Airlines is cooperating fully with the district attorney regarding criminal charges of fraud and embezzlement. The board of directors has resigned, and the new interim management, led by Kingsley Holdings, has pledged a complete overhaul of our verification protocols. "They fired me," Felicity whispered, her legs giving out. She sat heavily on the metal bench. "They can't. I know too much. I know about the overbooking policies. I know about the commissions." "They don't care," Russo said. "You're the sacrificial lamb, Felicity. Although, looking at the evidence Mr. Kingsley provided, you aren't exactly innocent. We found the bank transfers. Those commissions you were making for selling seats. You didn't declare them on your taxes. That's tax evasion on top of the fraud." Felicity put her head in her hands. "I just wanted the lounge to be quiet," she sobbed. "I just wanted it to be exclusive." "Well," Russo said, closing the tablet, "you got your wish. You're in a single cell. Can't get more exclusive than that." Meanwhile, in London, the fallout was hitting the collateral targets. Mr. Henderson, the rude man in the grey suit who had called the twins riff-raff, walked into his office at a hedge fund in Canary Wharf on Monday morning. He felt good. He had managed to get a flight on a competitor airline and had arrived only a few hours late. He swiped his badge at the turnstile. It beeped red. "Access denied." He tried again. "Access denied." A security guard, a young black man named David, stepped out from behind the desk. "Mr. Henderson," David said politely, "please hand over your badge." "There's a glitch," Henderson snapped, echoing the words Felicity had used only 24 hours prior. "Let me in." "No glitch, sir," David said. "HR is waiting for you in the lobby with a box of your personal effects. The partners saw the video, the one where you supported the harassment of the Kingsley twins. Our firm manages part of the Kingsley Pension Fund. Mr. Kingsley called the senior partner this morning. He said he prefers not to do business with firms that employ. How did you put it?" "Riff-raff." Henderson's jaw dropped. "But I didn't do anything. I just stood there." "Exactly," David said, taking the badge from Henderson's limp hand. "You just stood there. Goodbye, Mr. Henderson." 6 months later, the courtroom in Queens was packed. It wasn't a murder trial, but the Aura Airlines fraud case had captured the public imagination. It was a symbol of every time a person had been judged by their cover, every time a gatekeeper had abused their power. Morgan and Zoe sat in the front row. They looked different now. The incident had changed them. They were still stylish, but there was a new seriousness about them. They weren't just students anymore. They were board members of the Kingsley Foundation for Fair Travel, a non-profit they had launched with their own money to provide legal aid to victims of profiling in transit. Dawson sat between them, a silent mountain of support. Felicity sat at the defendant's table. She looked aged. Her hair was dull, her skin sallow. She had refused a plea deal. She was convinced that she could explain herself to a jury, that she could make them understand that she was just protecting the company. Her lawyer, a court-appointed public defender named Mr. Trent, looked exhausted. He had tried to get her to plead guilty to a lesser charge, but Felicity's arrogance was a terminal condition. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Ms. Gable, called her final witness. "The people call Roger Smith." Roger, the former station manager, walked to the stand. He had cut a deal. In exchange for his testimony against Felicity and the corrupt culture of the old management, he avoided jail time, though he was banned from working in aviation for life. He now managed a car wash in New Jersey. "Mr. Smith," Prosecutor Gable asked, "did Ms. Baines have the authority to override the system and delete a valid ticket?" "She did," Roger said, avoiding eye contact with Felicity. "We gave senior agents that power for emergencies." "And did you instruct her to use that power to profile passengers based on race?" "No," Roger lied. Or perhaps it was a half-truth. He hadn't instructed it, but he had encouraged the revenue it generated. "But I knew she did it. We all knew. She called it filtering the flight. She bragged that she could spot a fake credit card just by looking at someone's shoes. And on the day in question," Gable continued, "did the system flag the Kingsley twins?" "No," Roger said softly. "The system verified them as VIPs. Felicity overrode the verification. She manually entered the fraud code so she could free up the seats for her waitlist clients." A murmur went through the courtroom. When it was the defense's turn, Mr. Trent tried to paint Felicity as a victim of a high-pressure corporate environment. But then, Felicity insisted on taking the stand. It was a disaster. "I was doing my job," Felicity shouted during cross-examination. "Those girls, they didn't look like they belonged. They were wearing hoodies. They were disrespectful." "Disrespectful how?" Ms. Gable asked calmly. "By existing in a space you felt was yours?" "It was mine," Felicity snapped. "I ran that desk for 15 years. I know who flies first class. It's not teenage girls with braids." The courtroom went dead silent. The racism wasn't subtext anymore. It was text. Judge Weaver, a stern man with wire-rimmed glasses, looked over his spectacles at Felicity. He shook his head slowly. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Verdict: guilty on all counts. Grand larceny, wire fraud, and civil rights violations. When the sentencing hearing came 2 weeks later, Morgan asked to speak. She walked to the podium. She didn't look at Felicity with anger. She looked at her with pity. "For a long time," Morgan said into the microphone, "I wanted you to hurt like you hurt us. I wanted you to be embarrassed. But watching you today, I realize you are already in a prison. You built a prison of prejudice and locked yourself inside it long before you were arrested. You thought you were the gatekeeper of the sky. You forgot that the sky belongs to everyone." Judge Weaver delivered the sentence. "Felicity Baines, you abused your position of trust to prey on vulnerable passengers. You monetized discrimination. I sentence you to 4 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of probation. Furthermore, you are ordered to pay restitution to the 32 victims identified by the investigation." The bang of the gavel sounded like a gunshot. Felicity didn't scream this time. She just slumped in her chair, finally realizing that no manager, no union, and no policy could save her from the consequences of her own hatred. 1 year later, JFK Terminal 4 had changed. The frosted glass partitions were gone, replaced by open, airy dividers that let the light in. The Priority 1 sign had been rebranded. It now read, "Kingsley Global, Premium Services." But the biggest change wasn't the architecture, it was the atmosphere. Morgan and Zoe stood at the entrance of the new check-in lounge. They were 20 now, a year wiser, a year stronger. They were heading back to London for their university graduation. Behind the counter stood a young woman named Sarah. She had bright pink hair, a nose ring, and a visible tattoo on her arm. Under the old regime, she would never have been hired. Under the Kingsley regime, she was the shift supervisor, because she had the highest customer satisfaction rating in the company. "Good morning, Miss Kingsley," Sarah beamed, typing quickly. "I see you're in 1A and 1B. I have your baggage tags ready." "Thanks, Sarah," Zoe said, smiling. "How is the new software working?" "Flawless," Sarah said. "And the bias training module you guys designed, the staff is actually loving it. It turns out people like treating other people with respect. Who knew?" Dawson walked up behind the girls. He wasn't flying today. He was just there to see them off. He looked at the bustling terminal, at the diverse mix of passengers moving freely, at the staff who looked happy rather than stressed. He put his hands on his daughter's shoulders. "You know," Dawson said quietly, "I spent 30 years building an energy empire. I thought that was my legacy. But this, forcing an entire industry to look in the mirror? That's the real work. We didn't do it alone, Dad," Morgan said, leaning into him. "We needed the hammer." "And the money," Zoe added with a smirk. "Mostly the hammer." Dawson laughed. As the twins walked toward security, they didn't have to sneak. They didn't have to worry about their clothes or their hair. They walked with the confidence of two women who knew that dignity wasn't something a gate agent could give or take away. It was inherent. They passed the spot where Felicity used to stand. It was occupied by a digital kiosk now. Zoe paused for a second, looking at the empty space. "Do you think about her?" Zoe asked. Morgan adjusted her bag. "Who?" Zoe smiled. "Exactly." They turned and walked through the scanner, stepping into the future they had fought for, a future where the only thing that grounded a flight was the weather, not the color of your skin. Thank you for watching this story of justice and karma. If you enjoyed seeing how Morgan and Zoe turned a moment of discrimination into a movement of change, and if you believe that everyone deserves respect regardless of how they look, please hit that like button. It helps us share these stories with more people. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new episode of hard-hitting drama and real-life revenge. And tell us in the comments below. Have you ever been judged by your appearance in a public place? How did you handle it? We want to hear your story.